Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This is Haider Mehdi, and this is our series of English language weekly programs that we hope to commence on a regular basis about issues inside Pakistan, South Asia, Middle East. Um, Thank you very much for watching my program. This is the voice of Free Pakistan for Pakistanis outside and inside Pakistan, and I have the great pleasure today in inviting Sayyid Shani Ali Mehdi. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shan, welcome to the program.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for having me on the program. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Shan. Thank you. And just to let you know that Shan is a policy researcher with interest in and specializing in South Asian conflict resolution. And today we've invited him to try and unpack the Pakistan India conflict and a couple of other issues, especially Trump's meeting Julani and Imran Khan's release. So, Shah, just to set the context for the first part, which is the India Pakistan conflict that's taken place, we have here a very interesting timeline of what took place on the aerial battle. And I just want to run this by you before seeking your insight. Um, there was a total of 72 aircraft from the Indian side, 42 from the Pakistani sides. There are nearly confirmed reports of 6 or 7 Indian aircraft being down. But I'd like to go through the timeline, which is really interesting. The timeline is that at 12 p.m. midnight, the Indian Air Force initiated the first wave of takeoffs, and their aircraft started taking off. Then at 12 minutes past midnight, the Pakistan Air Force picked up this activity and initiated their combat readiness 12 minutes later. And then we have at 12:23, another 11 minutes later, the Pakistani jets begin taking off one by one, and the time from detection to actual response was less than 11 minutes. So it shows a lot about the combat readiness of the Pakistani Air Force. Then at 12:30, the Indian 72 aircrafts have completed their takeoffs from all their air bases, which were 11, by the way. The Pakistani aircraft 42 took off from 3 air bases. And then at 12:37, when the entire Pakistani Air Force was airborne and it was being provided uh, intelligence, it was at this point in time that they were locked in a standoff near the border, right? So 42 aircraft PAF and 72 of the Indian Air Force. Then at 12:40, the Indians started launching their long range air-to-air missiles at predetermined civilian targets inside Pakistan, which are outside the defensive zone. Interestingly, at 12:45, the PAF successfully locked on to all those Indian aircrafts that had been launching these air-to-air missiles, and the orders came that from now, deterrent standoff, that is, don't fire, move to engage and shoot down hostile aircraft. And then at 12:50, the Pakistan Air Force launches their PL-15 long-range missiles, which results in the bringing down of the call sign Godzilla, which is one Rafale was brought down, the other reported a mid-air explosion. And this whole combat lasted 25 minutes. The PF maintained strict discipline, selecting only targeting those Indian aircraft that had fired. They did not fire on the Indian aircraft that had not opened fire. And this is a nice graphic of the engagement. And what it tells us that the entire engagement from end to end lasted 2 hours from the time the Indians took off to the times both the air forces landed. So this is an interesting insight, factual, hopefully, of what we know. So,
Gee.
what do
Thank
you
you.
make of this, Sean?
No, really appreciate that big, perfect rundown. So I think it's clear from everything that we've seen online, everything that we've seen from neutral international observers, it's clear that there was at least two Indian jets downed, possibly three, possibly four. But according to the Indian side, they said that they targeted some Pakistani F-16s, a Pakistani JF-17 as well. But currently, there's no evidence to support those claims. But according to the neutral observers, according to international community, we can be fairly certain that at least two Indian jets were down. So let's start off with that as our basis, right?
Okay.
People have
Okay.
been talking about, we will share on the screen as well a couple of articles to show what, for example, The Economist has talked about this battle. It should be
Okay.
coming up on the screen very shortly. But
Yes.
it's very clear that there were some jets down. Now, why is this important? People say that India lost some jets. India, people are talking about them losing this conflict overall, but I don't think that's the case. It's not a that seems like a very myopic view. We have to remember that India also was able to penetrate Pakistani's air defenses, and they were also able to target Pakistani military bases with their long range missiles. Supposedly, they used the BrahMos ballistic missile, which is a pretty big deal. So, just setting this context, India did lose jets, but also Indian missiles did penetrate Pakistani air defenses. So, those two things are a huge deal. You can't say if you're a Pakistani nationalist or somebody who's if you consider yourself somebody aligned with the Pakistani military establishment's views, you can't just say that Pakistan won, we took down Indian jets, and this is a new war that we won, and we're going to celebrate this every year because. If you're somebody in the military circles, you would know that this was actually a pretty big deal from Pakistan's air defenses side. It was a pretty big loss, and to have ballistic missiles enter your airspace, not being targeted by any of your air defenses, and pretty much land on target. They attacked our air bases, Nur Khan Air Base, for example, which is a big deal. Of research.
So here is the Economist, and I'm just going to show the headline. The Economist says the Chinese weapons gave Pakistan a new edge against India, and America and its allies are now scrambling for details. So that's a really huge, big one. The next one is from Al Jazeera, and Al Jazeera questions, did Pakistan shoot down five Indian fighter jets? What we know, and they go into the details about the controversy and the conflicting claims on both sides. And one of the things that we shared earlier was the fact that they may have been five or six or seven. Um, but from the international, certainly from the international media, France 24, there is a indication at least two Rafale were shot down. So this is Al Jazeera. Then, interestingly, Reuters has a very interesting headline, and it says exclusive: Pakistan's Chinese-made jet brought down two Indian fighter aircraft. U.S. officials say so. The number two, which is really, I think, associated with Rafale, keeps coming up and up. And then we have very interesting headline again from Reuters, which is global militaries to study India Pakistan fighter jet battle. And we kind of went through a blow by blow account of that. So that's a really interesting one. And finally, I think the one that to me was most interesting was the national interest, which says how Chinese missiles routed India's air force over Pakistan. More article that we're sharing. This is France 24. This is Chinese weapons pass combat test in India, Pakistan clash with flying colors. And then we have this one from the national interest, which talks about how Pakistan's drone army won the war against India. And then finally another one from the national interest, which talks about why has India's military performed so poorly against Pakistan. Without strong leadership in Islamabad, with passions running high and with foreign powers actively pouring gasoline on the fire, all signs point towards further escalation. This is obviously an older article, May 9, but the interesting is why has the Indian military performed so poorly? Yes, Shan.
Thank you for sharing that. So the question here is the international community, the international observers, neutral observers, they're all looking at this conflict and they sense that India has performed subparly. They haven't lived up to the expectation that their military has espoused over the past few years. This is a big deal, not just because it's between India and Pakistan, but because this is a almost a microcosm of what's happening between the West and China. In this current conflict, we saw Pakistan using Chinese weapons, India using European or French weapons. What that has done now in the international context, international community, people have viewed this India-Pakistan theater as a way to view a potential or a future conflict between, let's say, China and Taiwan, Western-backed Taiwan. So it's extremely important to see what exactly has happened. Why, according to the Western neutral observers, why has India not been able to, quote unquote, put up a better show? What provided Pakistan with the abilities and the expertise to be able to take down several Indian jets? So these are the questions that we have to ask ourselves right now. And why are we asking ourselves these questions? Because it's reflective of a greater geopolitical change in the region, right? Previously, India was seen as a bulwark, as a counter to Chinese influence. But because of what we just saw in the past couple of weeks, people in the West, people in Western capitals are taking another look at this area and are saying, hey, maybe we can't put all our eggs in India in the Indian basket, because we just saw what Pakistan was able to do with Chinese weapons. So what would happen if China directly goes into a conflict with India? So in that
Hmm.
context, I think there is a lot of changing perspectives. Maybe people are revisiting how they viewed India. The whole idea of India being a counterweight to China is now maybe not as strong as people used to think in the past. So these are some things that I wanted to discuss with you.
I think that's a huge observation, Sean. Irrespective of how this conflict started, what happened, and what are the actual facts, the perception clearly is that in this encounter, Pakistan came out on top. So that's one perception, both in the international media and the now in the Indian media. I think the other point that you make is of far greater importance is the perception of India being a near equivalent to China in terms of military prowess as well as international trade. And here is, according to the West, a much smaller country, much weaker in terms of its military arsenal, spends much less on defense, and is able to get the better of a much larger neighbor. So I think India must be really smarting under this perception that seems to be settling in and emerging from Western capitals about India's ability to be the bulwark of anti Chinese narrative or anti Chinese approach towards, orchestrated by the Americans. And so, how do you see this change in perception impacting US Indian ties, and more importantly for Pakistan, do you think it may lead to some rash actions by India against Pakistan to try and redeem its prestige?
I think definitely to your last point, they're smarting. They feel that they've been, I wouldn't say maybe humiliated, but they feel like that their public perception has definitely gone down in the past couple of days. And I'm talking about India. So there is a sense within the Hindu nationalist, right wing leaning segments of Indian society that they haven't really had the last say. They haven't had the last word or the last slap. When two kids are fighting, one of them always wants to have the last hit. So right now, from the perspective of India, they haven't got that last hit. If you look at what's happening in Pakistan, look at the celebrations that are going on the streets. You have events being organized by the military regime every single day. Just 2 days ago, the supposedly five of the Pakistan Air Force pilot jets who shot down those Rafales and the MiGs, they were put on display in front of the nation. So Pakistan is on some sort of military war footing high. In India, the situation is a little different. In India, there's a little bit of a sense of the BJP back down. Modi didn't really give it enough to the Pakistanis. So that's kind of the difference in perceptions that we're seeing in both countries. But I think from the Indian perspective, they I wouldn't say that they're planning some sort of rash response or anything, but there is definitely recognition that there is no new normal. And what does that mean? That means that perhaps we're going to be seeing drone warfare a lot more common. In the past 20 or 30 years, we used to see artillery firing on the border lines in the LOC and in the international border. That was kind of our signal, Indian and Pakistani signal, to say, hey, things are not going well. So, let's heat up the border. The term that we use is heating up the border. So now, instead of just artillery and mortar strikes and cross border firing, I think there's going to be a lot more drone warfare happening between the two countries. We'll see quadrocopters like you see on the screen, probably crossing the border from time to time. Yeah, in more severe cases, we may see UAVs, and in the more severe cases, we may see armed UAVs with missiles crossing the border. So maybe this is something that now the region we're going to be seeing more and more of. It's a little bit of a shift in India-Pakistan relations, particularly in India-Pakistan military relations. So something to keep an eye on.
Hmm.
One
Interesting.
thing, one thing I do want to talk about specifically related to your field, which is the influencer, the online YouTuber realm. I think one thing that is coming out of this conflict is that perhaps there's going to be more of an emphasis in this area, in this YouTuber, vlogger, influencer field, and that is primarily because what you showed earlier, which was a lack of trust now that the international media has on South Asian media,
Hmm.
particularly Indian media. But I won't just say that it's exclusive to Indian media. Pakistani media has certainly has its own shortcomings. But just to give you an example of how the international community is viewing Indian media, we just have a New York Times article which has is titled "How the Indian Media Amplified Falsehoods in the Drumbeat of War." So to see mainstream Western media, a mainstream Western outlet like the New York Times talking about how, uh, you know, for all, for better words, is pretty poor, is a pretty big, I would say, kind of change in the international narrative. Because previously, when we would talk about India and Pakistan, or the international community used to talk about India and Pakistan, Indian media, you'd never really countered, or you never really thought that Indian media, needs to be fact checked to the extent that we see today. So now, when we see news coming out of India, when we see news coming out of government aligned sources in India, I feel that the international community will be a lot more wary than they used to be in the past. In the Pakistani side, there was definitely a trust deficit from the government in Pakistan versus the international community. So anytime that there was sources, media sources coming out from Pakistan, there was always uh, from the get go, people would be looking at that with wariness. But I feel like that has also seeped into the Indian media sphere as well. So just to
Hmm.
say all this to say that people like you, people like Mohit Pirzada, Wajid Said Khan, all others in Pakistan, as well as those across the border in India, I'm personally not too well versed in the Indian influencer, is particularly the left wing sphere, but I do know of a few like Dhruv Rati. I've been hearing some news about some influencer called Jyoti Malhotra, who's been arrested in India for supposed links with ISI, or Pakistani High Commission contacts.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I am cautiously optimistic that perhaps with this realization of mainstream media being completely poor in both India and Pakistan, perhaps there will be more scope for on bottom up grassroots level voices such as YouTubers and influencers like yourself to be able to promote understanding between the two countries. So that was just a point on the media. Please go ahead.
So that's really good. I'd like you to dwell a little bit on the fact that India is smarting, angry, upset. It seems to have lost its cloud, also its media cloud, as you just mentioned. Do you think it may prompt them into launching something rash again against Pakistan? Because the drumbeats of war seem to be building up. I heard a statement from I think it was Jay Shankar was somebody high up in the government, which said that the ceasefire is only up till the 18th, and after that, all options are open.
Great point, and thank you for bringing that up. Actually, bring me to the next point. I do not see India reopening the conflict as we saw in the past 2 weeks. I think they've lost that window. The window for continuing this has passed. If they were to do that, they would definitely be seen as an aggressor from all quarters of the international community. So I think Jaishankar is, I would imagine Jaishankar is smart enough to know not to do that. However, what we may see is a heating up of the asymmetrical warfare that many people have agreed that India is involved in asymmetrical warfare in Balochistan, just how as Pakistan is involved in, according to Indian sources, in Indian Kashmir. So we should expect things to heat up in, for example, Balochistan. And just to give an example, we had a statement from the Baloch Liberation Army, I believe, it was a BLA, during the conflict while India and Pakistan were actually having the conflict a couple of weeks ago, that they said that if India is willing, the Baloch Liberation Armies will actually act as a military arm for the Indian government to put pressure
Mm.
on the
Yes,
Pakistanis to join the combat.
yes, yes.
So
I do.
that was a very big statement, and we
Mm,
shouldn't ignore that and put that sweep that under the brush,
mm,
because India realizes that, especially with now what they've seen with Pakistani convergence with Chinese weapons, the Pakistani convergence of Chinese weapons, the Pakistani military's convergence of Chinese radars, the cross collaboration, data linkages that now the entire Pakistani Air Force has especially in the northern theater, using Chinese radars and Chinese electronic warfare capabilities. India has realized that, hey, you know what? Maybe we do not have air superiority over Pakistan as we assumed that we did over the past 20 years.
mm,
So that
mm,
calculus has changed slightly. And
mm,
perhaps now they're thinking that maybe they need to put more of their resources into that proxy war, asymmetrical warfare that
mm,
Pakistan claims India is involved with.
mm.
Now,
And,
what? Yeah,
mm.
G, go ahead.
Then go ahead, please.
So when we do talk about proxy war and India's response, what are India's options? It's very tricky because we have to remember India's entire narrative is that Pakistan is a state sponsor of terror, right? And their entire narrative since the Modi government has been in power, or since actually Mumbai attacks from 2008. So we have to remember that has been in India's entire narrative, an entire paradigm from where they view Pakistan-India relations, at least for the past 20 or so years. Now, if India is saying that we're going to, or Indian policymakers are saying that they're going to put more emphasis into asymmetrical warfare, that completely goes against their entire stance of being against, states sponsoring terrorism, or being a proponent of using terrorism as a geopolitical tool. So that
Mm,
goes completely against Indian policy.
mm,
And what is actually even more troublesome, if you are an Indian government policymaker, what is more troublesome that is happening across the world right now is this slight shift from viewing terrorism as a black and white issue into now moving towards a realm where ex-terrorists, or old previous militants are moving into the fold of politics. And just
mm,
to give you an example, some big news and big developments taking place in the Middle East over the past week
mm,
was Trump visiting Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And according to me, even bigger than that was Trump and Macron physically meeting Jolani,
July.
who
So,
is
we'll just move to that, but just to wrap up our last section on this, I think you're absolutely right on what India may do. I think the water treaty and its ability to withhold water is going to be another aspect. And if I have a conspiracy hat on, if India were to indulge in an overt hot war as we've seen previously, my sense is it would not go in blind. It will definitely be going in cahoots or coordination with the Pakistani military general Asim Munir, so that it does not escalate and go out of control as it did with the aircraft downing. So that's my conspiracy theory, but we'll leave it at that. But I want to go to your absolutely this thing.
just before we move on to Jelani's point, that's actually a really important point that you brought up. That especially with the Indus Water Treaty, I think it's important to understand that even if India decided today that they wanted to cut off Pakistani waters, it would take them at least 5 6 years to build the infrastructure,
Correct.
billions of dollars pouring it into it, and only then will there be some sort of on ground change. So I think no matter how much the Indian right wingers bluster about the IWT, It's not a short term tool for them at the moment. It's I would say it's a medium term tool, definitely.
I
Medium term
think
or
it'll
long term.
I think it'll be a nuisance. They'll stop, release. They will stop when we need it. They will
Right.
release it when we don't. It will affect crops, even in the short to mid-term, before they make the arrangements for new dams and new canals and new reservoirs. It's going to be a problem. And given our fragile economy and the impact on our agriculture, I think it'll have some impact, and they will continue unless the International Court of Justice or somebody steps in and says, hey, you can't do that. But I love the way the segue you brought in from terrorism now not being black and white to saying, you know uh, it's just amazing how you beautifully, it's like saying, is Syria's new president a US ally or an enemy? So someone said putting lipstick on a pig or putting lipstick on a gorilla. And here is someone who had a $10 million bounty on him as a terrorist, Julani, and meeting Trump, shaking hands on Wednesday. This is interesting, very, very interesting. So what do you make of this?
Very, very interesting. Definitely. One could say these pictures are almost historic. Just for our viewers who are not aware of who Jolani is, Jolani was the head of Al Qaeda in Syria. So let me repeat this. Jolani, the person who you just saw in this picture, who's standing next to Trump and Mohammed bin Salman from Saudi Arabia, was the head of Al Qaeda in Syria.
Wow.
This was during the Syrian civil war from 2011 onwards. So just to give you an idea of how things can change on ground, doesn't matter what side you support Assad, you don't support Assad, you support the Free Syrian Army, or you don't, things can change on the ground. This is what we see. Geopolitics are constantly fluid, and most countries around the world, they only act in their own national interests. There's no, as much as many countries would like you to believe, very few of them act purely on ideological basis. A lot of it is just purely on national interests.
Hmm.
So how does this connect with everything that we're talking about? India, when we're talking about India and Pakistan, India historically, as I said, has always said in the past, since the BJP came in the past 20 years or so, we will not talk to Pakistan. They are a state sponsor of terror. We will not talk about trade. We will not talk about Kashmir. We will not talk about fishermen being arrested over the international waters. So, and they said we will only focus on one thing, which is terrorism coming from Pakistan. So, what we've just seen in the past 1 week, Macron, Trump, MBS, they're meeting Jalani, who is, again, as I repeat, the ex head of Al Qaeda in Syria. If they can go and meet and hug the ex head of Al Qaeda in Syria, why would they listen to India when India goes and says that, hey, Pakistan is sponsoring terrorism from Pakistan. We're about to go to war with them. We're going to completely destabilize the region. We're going to have billions of dollars lost in both countries. But you have to support us because Pakistan is a state sponsor of terror. Now, from the perspective of a Western policymaker or a Western, government official or analyst, you'll say that, yeah, sure, India, we do understand your concerns. Terrorism is a global cause. It's a global scourge. It's a common enemy for everybody. But at the end of the day, we have our national interest. We're pragmatists. We believe in real politics. So we will not actually support you because your stance is on Pakistan being a state sponsor of terror, and at the same time our foreign policies in the Middle East are actually engaging with ex-terrorists. So it doesn't look
Hmm.
right for us to be able to do the same thing with you. So that's one perspective. I'm not saying that this is how the US foreign policy is running. I'm just saying that this is one consideration now, and potentially why we have not seen as strong of Western support for India as they had anticipated, and
Hmm.
especially why we see these comments coming out from Trump being effusive towards Pakistan, saying how Pakistanis were powerful. They really put up a strong fight. Um, Basically equating India and Pakistan, which is
Hmm.
completely against what India has been trying to do for the past 20 years. If
Right.
I were somebody in the Indian Foreign Service and I saw that statement by Trump saying that India, Pakistan have been going to war for thousands of years and we will do whatever we can to help them,
And
I would,
Pakistanis are a great people. They're terrific people. They make great
yeah,
products. I would love to do business with them. I'd
exactly.
like to solve the Kashmir problem. They've internationalized. I mean, everything that India worked against over the last 20, 30, 40 years have come to naught in these 4 days.
Exactly. And now the question is, so the Western world has a slightly shifted opinion towards militancy or whatever you can call it, terrorism, viewing proxies as geopolitical tools. How does that impact the situation in Pakistan? Now, as both of us here, we're big, strong proponents of democracy in Pakistan, rule of law, human rights for all. I actually think that this is going to play a slightly negative role for the politics in Pakistan, or negative in the sense that it's going to make it harder for pro democracy activists to have their voices heard. And the reason I say that is because Trump realizes that he needs influence in whatever country he's dealing with, right? Currently, he knows that while it may be so that the majority of Pakistanis do support Imran Khan, who is currently incarcerated, he realizes that the person with the power is Asim Munir, who is the army chief. And I think this recent bout that we just saw between India and Pakistan has only further solidified that notion in Trump's head. He views Asim Munir as somebody who has power, he can control the country. I don't think he cares too much about the fact that he's unelected and the fact that the elected leader of Pakistan is in jail. So this is how I'm viewing Trump's current calculus towards Pakistan, how he's viewing the leadership and how he views this
That is
entire decision.
that is a possibility. I agree, and I've been saying that for several months. It is Trump's perspective about Pakistan, who is the best partner. For now, maybe because Trump, like you said, is so simplistic in his view of this part of the region, and really talking of 1,000 years war, just gives us a sense of how deeply knowledgeable he is about it. So that there's a possibility. My view is that that will dissipate very soon, and the calculus will significantly change again, as Imran and democracy being the best option for the U.S. Because the chatter in the State Department is that Asim Muni, if anyone can bring about a reasonable, even arrangement between China and India and Pakistan, it's Imran Khan, certainly not Asim Munir and the army, despite the army's and the military's dependence on a Chinese military technology. But I want to take your a quick comment on India's sponsorship of terrorism. And I've been showing this a little while ago as well. This is the Jay Shankar thanking the Taliban for this Palagam solidarity. They don't even recognize it. These people were considered terrorists by the world. Kind of seeing India moving into an area that they seem to have been blaming us all along, which is becoming a state sponsor of terrorism and coming to terms with terrorist outfits as well as the Afghan Taliban. Quick comment on that, and then we go to Imran Khan's release and wind up the program.
And I think it's really important also to understand the shifting geopolitics between India and Afghanistan, Taliban run Afghanistan, right? So when you have India talking about Pakistan being a state sponsor of terror and having links with terrorists and backing terrorists, and then when you have the Indian Foreign Affairs Minister meeting Taliban minister, that also reduces the impact of India's policies, right, or India's narrative. You can't have, as India would always say to Pakistan in the past 10 years, you can't have good terrorists and bad terrorists. So, according to this news article, it seems like that's what India is doing. India is saying that the Taliban are good terrorists, the Afghan Taliban are good terrorists, but the Kashmiri militants are bad terrorists because they target India, which is what the same argument that India would say to Pakistan when Pakistan used to differentiate between the Afghan Taliban and the Pakistani Taliban, aka the TTP. So it's the same narrative that now can be put against India, which is, in my opinion, reducing their narrative in the international fora. And secondly, just a small point I'd like to bring on. Um, India has actually, as much as the Indian foreign policy or foreign service would like you to believe, they have had experiences in proxy wars in the past. They have had links with Islamic militant groups. You know, the BJP will definitely make you think that there's no links between their government and militant groups, specifically Islamic militant groups. But in the 1990s, there was a group called the Ikhwan al Muslimin, which were anti Kashmiri nationalist militants who were hired and backed by the Indian government at the time. So I'll repeat this. This word is Ikhwan al Muslimin, who were anti Kashmiri nationalists. They were militants who were against Kashmiri nationalism, who espoused a sort of dogmatic view of Islam, that were backed by the Indian government. And of course, you know, with any terrorist, any militant group, the human rights abuses are going to be widely widespread and abound, and that is exactly what happened with them. So just to give you some context setting and some level setting, you know, people like to promote this narrative that Pakistan is the state sponsor of terror alone in the region, and everyone else in the region, you know, does not dabble in these proxy wars, which I think is a little ignorant. I think there's a lot of countries in the regions, particularly in South Asia and the Middle East, that deal with proxy wars, and they should be dealt with accordingly, according to the law. They should be dealt, but in I believe in an equal setting, right? You can't pick and choose which countries you want to persecute and which countries you want to let go off the hook. So to that point, we're talking about Trump and his changing calculus towards India and Pakistan, and we're discussing whether Asim Munir in Pakistan has gained strength or whether, you know, this has negatively impacted him. My personal view is that whatever has happened in the past 2 weeks has actually strengthened the army's hold, and but that begs the question: was this, who benefited most from whatever happened in the past 2 weeks? That's the question we always have to ask ourselves. Whenever something happens and people are throwing conspiracy theories around, and there's a lot of theories being you know, bandied about, we always have to remember who benefited the most. And at the end of the day, we can see two major powers of center that benefited the most. In Pakistan, the Pakistani military regained a lot of its lost respect, a lot of its lost clout that it had given away in the past 2 years based on its fascist policies against the Pakistani people. And number two, we see that the Indian nationalist, right wing Hindutva nationalist core has been rejuvenated and revitalized. If people have been following Indian general elections over the past couple of years, you may have noticed that the BJP has won less seats than it would have in the previous general election, even though certain, you know, state elections point to the contrary, that BJP still has a lot of support. But there is a certain trend emerging that may point to the fact that BJP is losing some support in India. Now, after this 2 weeks, they have again, once again, cemented their hold in India, as similarly as how Pakistan had, the Pakistani army has cemented its hold in Pakistan. So my question to you is, we've seen a lot of reports, particularly from yourself. I read a lot of your tweets, and your narrative seems to be that this entire exercise, let's say, was coordinated to an extent. And now on Twitter, on X, we're seeing a lot of reports coming about directly from Modi and directly from Jaishankar as well, saying that they had informed the Pakistani leadership that they will be firing missiles at these 9 various spots. So I think what your narrative was, that this is coordinated, and now the words that are coming out of India seem to gel together. And it seems to be that there was some communication taking place before everything exploded, as to what we saw.
Thank you, and I think we'll end it at that. Yes, you're absolutely right. I still maintain and unequivocally, unqualified, that there was a definite engagement prior to the actual engagement. I, the one of the reasons we went through that blow by blow with the Indian aircraft was just to show how quickly it escalated into an aerial engagement. And in my view, that was the out of script that was not agreed to between the two. And that is what shocked Narendra Modi to say that, oh my God, they attacked us, as if it was a big surprise. He says in Urdu, और उन्होंने हम ही पर ही हमला कर दिया. So, I mean, jokes apart, this is a very significant aspect that we now need to study, because I doubt India, with its political in the political arena, in its security arena, in its economic arena, and the potential damage to its image and infrastructure go blind into a hot war with Pakistan, unless there was some arrangement about saying, and one of my strange tweets was tit for tat and tat for tit, and that's it, and that's what's going to happen. And this. So this is my view. I think it's corroborated by a lot of social media activists, corroborated by Jay Shankar, it's corroborated by Narendra Modi's own statement, and I think more importantly, it clearly shows that thing is the next step, whether India will get back into a hot war with Pakistan. And based on what my earlier assumptions and deductions and perspective is, I doubt it very much. And if they do, it's absolutely clear that it would be done in coordination again with Asim Munir in the military. And lastly, to your point, John, I think this euphoria in Pakistan is going to be short lived as the reality hits Pakistan, as the economic bite hits Pakistan, as the fascism and authoritarianism reignites again. Asim is going to come down with far greater fury and vengeance, thinking that he now has the Pakistani people with him. They are not with him. The army hates him. The nation hates him. The nation hates the army. Those realities are going to come back very soon. So I don't think it's hunky dory and all good for Asim. But last comments and we wrap up.
Thank you. No, I think you really summed it up well. I agree with you. I don't think that this current high that the nation is having, the Pakistan nation is having, is going to last long because you can't you can't cover economic issues. You can't cover people having no jobs in the street. You can't cover crumbling infrastructure. You can't cover the demise of every institution in the country. Right? You can't really hide that. So I do agree with you that things. Uh, the anger and the fury that we see in the streets of Pakistan, and that is still there, will come to the fore soon again. And I just wanted to say thank you again for having me on the show. We're going to try to make this a regular occurrence, hopefully speaking in English, for a few reasons. One, because Haider Saab's program has been banned officially now in Pakistan on YouTube. So we are trying to now ingratiate ourselves and get some more perspectives from across the world, to strengthen and build this program into something that can be sustainable and impactful to people all across the world. And we're trying to make this not as academic as certain programs. We're trying to make it a bit more casual. We want to speak in a conversational tone. So we hope that this was useful, impactful. Apologies if some of my thoughts were kind of all over the place. I'll definitely try to be a bit more clear in the future. But thank you again. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you very much, Sean. I can't give you a lot of compliments given the relationship, but it was an amazing program. I was pretty much, hypnotized from, and, we hadn't really discussed in great detail what we were, the way we're going to. So thank you for your insights. I hope you can make yourself available once a week on a Sunday so we can continue this. We hope to invite other guests as well in this program. So we have a threesome, sometime maybe a foursome, and people who have a different perspective on the issues impacting Pakistan, India, South Asia, the Middle East, and hope to make this much more engaging and interesting for our viewers. So thank you very much. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all those who are fighting for peace in the world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all those in Pakistan who are fighting for a free, democratic Pakistan. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all those people who have suffered. And Imran Khan and his family, may they all be released. And pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep Pakistan Zindabad, Pindabad. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Shah.
Thank you.